So you think they would be after doing this for so long? You think I'd be able to like figure that shit out? Well, I'm still using like what am I using? Um, Anchor, and occasionally I use like GarageBand. I mean, who knows
Yeah,
really?
yeah, yeah.
I think there's
Well,
there's
if
a
you got a
certain
Mac, honestly, I think iMovie can do way more than people think.
really.
Yeah, yeah.
I've never used it. I've used it once, and it was to put together a bunch of like BMX and clips that my friend was doing, and I recorded them, and I tried to like make a little montage, put some nice little.
Yeah, that's sick. That's sick.
Yeah, it looked terrible.
Yeah,
clearly,
of course it
clearly
did.
it
Yeah,
was
cool,
it
of
was
course, of
done
course.
by an
That's
amateur.
cool. That's cool.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, after that crazy introduction, we're here with Rob. Um, Rob, how would you describe yourself, man?
Normal.
Okay.
Um, Works for Seed Legals. Lived in London for the past 5, 6 years. Grew up in Jersey. Um, Consider myself fairly laid back, carefree, nice guy. Hopefully.
Nice. So for all of us who are like myself, who don't know where Jersey is, where is Jersey?
Yeah, so Jersey's in the Channel Islands, which is part of the UK, but it's actually located a lot closer to France. So if you
Mm,
look at the map of Europe, you might know that England's above France,
mhm.
but then France kind of has like a really large bay, and the Channel Islands are all located in there. So about 20 miles from the French coast, you can see it from near my house actually, and we're about 100 miles from England.
And culture-wise, so from being in London for the last 5 or so years to being in Jersey
Mm.
for X amount of years prior to that, what are
Mm.
the biggest cultural differences that you've experienced?
Well, there's people other than white people. It's honestly a big one. The Jersey population is almost totally white. There is a lot more individuality amongst everybody who lives in London. In Jersey, obviously, because it's so small, people don't really want to break the mold too much because then other people will talk. So seeing people be a lot more individual in London is nice. But otherwise, a lot of things are the same. People still like football. People still like going to the pub. Um, we're still English at the end of the day.
Same laws as here in the UK, or is tax more beneficial over there?
So it's actually technically different. We've got our own government and we elect our own politicians, so they set their own law. But most of the time, we sort of follow the English.
Okay, and would you recommend it for someone to visit?
100%. Yeah, 100%. It's
Yeah.
really cheap to get over. Takes about 40 minutes on a
Mm.
plane. Especially in the summer, you get really good weather. Almost all of the beaches are basically deserted because there's so many of them and so few people on the island. So I think it's actually a hidden gem of the UK. I'd recommend anyone
See,
come.
why I mentioned that is right now with probably these travel restrictions due to be put in place post coronavirus, nobody's going anywhere outside of
Mm,
their home countries.
mm,
So I've taken it as an opportunity to maybe learn a little bit more about the UK, see what's in my own back garden, so to speak,
mm,
rather than having my focus on going
mm-hmm,
to my home away from home, aka Portugal.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Probably
but
gonna.
what is that where you normally go?
Oh man, I love Portugal.
I haven't
100%.
been. I'd like to go.
It's uh, it's amazing. What can I say? Some people would say the particular areas I like the most are very touristy.
Hmm.
The Algarves to some degree, Porto. Um, but I love them for a few particular reasons. One, it's the proximity to the sea, so you get that really fresh seafood.
Hmm.
Prior to like my first time having like fresh seafood, I didn't know what I was missing. It it really does taste different. You really can taste the difference.
Hmm.
It's fresher. It's more beautiful. There's particular brandies that are exclusive to Portugal, such as Maceira 5 Star Royal Brandy, which I've become a fan of, and that's why the people there are. It's one of the first places I've been to, so I've managed to like travel a little bit over the last 16 to 24 months. Where and it's going to sound really crazy. I didn't really experience like racism.
Or in Portugal
Normally
or
as
anywhere.
like a normally as a black male, you come off the airplane, you look around and everyone's looking at you. Now, my experience, it needs to be having has an asterisk next to it for a few reasons. One of them is when I did go one of the times, I went with my friend who's 6'7", 6'8", six foot
Hmm.
nine.
Hmm.
He only wears NBA apparel. I happened to be wearing some kind of like Marseille apparel throughout the
Mm.
whole trip. I had some, I don't know, footballers love to wear those like silly like MCM backpacks. I had MCM backpack.
Yeah.
So to some degree, my experience was a bit different because people maybe think people thought we were athletes. But nevertheless, like every time I've gone there, people have been polite.
Mm.
Another time I went to see a bunch of politicians from both Portugal and um, one of the Nordic states, and also Sweden too. Went out to a dinner with 20 of them with the local municipality. It was
Oh,
myself
no
and
way. What's the
yeah,
story there?
we got invited to provide workshops on youth empowerment. So Portugal are facing a very interesting problem. So like they call it like youth disengagement. And also, I think it's 30 to 50%, and the number escapes me. It's like a couple of months ago when I was actually at the workshop where the majority of their workforce over the age of 35, they fear will be replaced by automation. So, for example, a lot of their jobs are like manual labor jobs. So we went to a few different manufactories, and some of the jobs you can quite clearly see, sure, like when automation comes, that job will be removed, and that's one less person and one less family to be taken care of. So,
Mm.
right now, there's that plus a youth and um, lack of engagement. The youth aren't necessarily seeing like university as a viable option. So
Mm.
we were tasked to go over there, deliver some workshops, try and incentivize and motivate youth to take more interest in their education. And it's quite interesting to see countries such as Portugal and that one Sweden, well, that one state in the Nordics, I can't remember what it was.
Mm.
Also, Sweden being very proactive and taking care of their youth and pushing
Mm.
youth engagement. And you come back home to London or the UK, and it's like, fend for yourself, guys.
Mm. Do you think the Portuguese kids that you spoke to were motivated, but just hadn't had somebody to point them in the right direction?
Yes. So some of them were. So initially, it's that language barrier to overcome. So
Mm.
we worked hard to overcome it. By, popular dances like the wall, kidding with the wall. That's how we broke the barrier. But what we did find is like, a few of them were very, very motivated. They were very focused on making something of themselves, so to speak. But they saw that the traditional method of going to university not being for them because they didn't quite know what they were interested in doing. To some of the cases that parents weren't the most helpful in telling them or providing that expertise, because the the system I think has a few errors and a few holes. The first being like you're 16, 17 years old. How can you know? I mean, in some cases people may do, like you may be an example. How can you know what you're looking to dedicate the next 5, 6, 7 years of your life studying at the age of 16 with such little experience of the world and such little experience of just life in general? And in most cases, people are choosing topics and subjects based upon what they think they'll like, what their parents have done, what they
Mm.
think will give them a good job going
Mm.
forwards. And that's why you see many people like drop out in the very first 1 or 2 years because you realize that, oh shit, this isn't really what I want. And I've been living my life based on the values of other people.
Well, I think the way Israel do it is actually a really interesting, uh, different approach to the way we do it in the UK, because they've got national service that you have to do
Mm-hmm.
when you're 18. And so what that means is people go and do that after they leave high school. And then what Jonathan was telling me, our colleague, is that after they come back from national service, they still don't necessarily go into education straight away. They'll get a job somewhere. And then at about the age of 25 is when they start making the decision to do further education. And his argument is by then you've got a much clearer idea about what you actually want to do, and you're a lot more mature in your approach towards it. And so I think it's a
I
good
agree
argument.
because I'm in a stage where for some reason, whatever the dumb reason was, actually, I think I know it was job security. I decided to study accountancy.
Mm.
I took my A levels early. So from year 12, we were approximately like 17, 18 till post graduation. So like 21 years old, my mindset was fixed on being an accountant. Like amazing. That was the goal. Tunnel
Yep.
visions on that. Then you get to a stage, or I got to a stage personally where I got to a final four interview and I was
Mm.
told I wasn't the accountant type. And then even prior to that, I had what I call like the finals crisis, where I was like coming up to the end of my finals, coming up to the end of my exams, and realizing, oh
Mm.
shit, I actually don't like what I'm studying.
Mm, mm,
Who
mm.
actually likes
It's
accountancy?
actually a very similar story in Jersey, because our finance industry is the main industry in Jersey, it's taken over
Hmm.
from tourism and agriculture. The majority of jobs available are as an accountant or doing trust work. So we see in our high schools kind of like a 50-50, where people will either not go to university and train as an accountant, but they do it through the companies as well. So they don't even necessarily go to university or do any other further education, or you go to university and then do whatever you want to do. But a lot of people experience what you did as well, where they see the cash and the good opportunity in the good company, because we've got the big four hit there as well. Slightly different level of competition because it's offshore, so there's less people wanting that job. But they go through all of the exams, qualify as an accountant, or don't even get that far and realize I don't actually like doing this. What am I doing? It's just so boring.
And in most cases, what do they pivot into afterwards?
Well, it's difficult. It's actually difficult for people in Jersey because, as I say, it's so dominated by finance. Often you get people who are just sort of stuck in a bit of a rut where they're comfortable with the salary that they're earning, but they just don't enjoy their job.
Mm. I have that. So for some reason, I know the reason, so that's not quite accurate. There's a dream, a fallacy sold to like young um, Afro-Caribbean Londoners, or even I think it's just across the UK, of
Hmm.
like going to university, studying something like finance related, and then going into finance because that's where the big bucks are made.
Hmm.
And typically for most of these financial roles, they have maybe, 2, 3, 4 week internships, maybe like insight days. And that's all the exposure they get into these roles. And as you can imagine, in that very short time frame, these companies are portraying themselves to be the most progressive, the best companies in
Mm.
the world. And people
Mm.
are, falling for that hook, line, and sinker, to people getting into these industries and realizing, oh shit, like they're stuck now. The money's great. Like they maybe wouldn't go anywhere else and receive like the
Hmm.
same salary, particularly
Hmm.
as like relatively junior roles. But they hate what they do, and it really like
Mm.
drains the life out of them. So much so, I have some friends who they plan their year in the following manner: for like 6 to 8 weeks, they just like put their head down and just grind away at their
Yeah.
finance roles. But
Yeah.
then they go on holiday for like a week.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They
Well, I
come
mean,
back and they do
it's
that.
done on a more kind of micro scale in Jersey, but I
Mm.
mean, it's just that old cliche living for the weekend. But I mean, they'll just slog through 5 days of transferring money around and not enjoying it, just to just go big on the weekend and then just repeat that.
So, how did you manage to find something that you're interested in or buy?
Um, Sort of by accident. My first decision was really pragmatic, like yours. The subjects that I was good at school were English and history, and kind of the subjects you needed to write essays for. And so that it was more of a process of elimination, really. My
Mm.
dad is a doctor. If I haven't told you already, so naturally you would have thought I would have gone towards that, but I just wasn't very good at the sciences or anything, so that wasn't an option. So then I was thinking, what do I do? Looked at what subjects you could get into at university for the subjects I was good at school. Law seemed to be the most useful in terms of the knowledge you learn, but also just as a discipline, and obviously you can enter it as a profession as well. So it just made sense for me to choose that.
And how have you found it since?
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant
Oh wow.
actually. There's a lot of people who would argue that doing a law degree as your undergraduate degree at university is uh, not necessary, because
Mhm.
obviously you can do your law conversion, and then the argument goes that then you can do something you actually want to do. But I'd say that I think a lot of people would enjoy doing law, provided you give it the time it kind of requires. First year was difficult for me because I came into first year of university with the same kind of work ethic and level of motivation as I had in my final year at school, which, to be fair, probably wasn't actually that much.
Mhm.
I mean, in hindsight, it obviously wasn't, because I didn't do very well in my first year exams at all. And as a consequence, I thought law was difficult and I didn't enjoy it as much. But once you actually sit down and give it the time it needs, and you get through your courses and you start understanding it on a kind of broader level, I think it's really fascinating. And I think it's also like fantastic reading judgments written by judges about really important cases that change the way society is, written by some of the smartest people in the country, and just reading how they make arguments is something that really fascinated me.
So I'm ignorant to law as a whole. Do you have one example of a most recent outcome that you think has fundamentally changed how we interact with the world from a legal point of view?
Mhm. Um, well, the one that got all the press attention recently was Gina Miller 2, which is the case about whether Boris Johnson was acting within power, probably butchering actually the ratio, but in summary, whether he was right or wrong to postpone Parliament in order to get Brexit through.
Hmm.
Um, and they decided that it was illegal for him to do that. But if they had decided the other way, then he might have got his way, and we might have a different Brexit to what we had, to what we have now. But I mean, there's loads. Like the one that weirdly struck is coming to mind now. R.V. Brown was a case about gay men performing like sadomasochistic acts on one another, but it was talking about whether you're allowed to give consent for somebody to harm you, and they decided that you're not,
Wow.
whether you consent to it or not. Um,
Yeah.
judgments change things constantly, and it's kind of what I'm hopeful to get into when I get more experience as a barrister, is that you might get lucky and you might have a case that goes to the Court of Appeal, and then it's an interesting point of law that they've not really considered, and then it ends up going to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court might decide to change the law, and then you've had a really big influence on something that will have an effect for many years to come.
So that's so why I liked accountancy is in most cases, I mean, outside of creative accountancy, which is typically frowned upon, unless you are a tax accountant or tax advisor, then we're all good for that. Is the black or whiteness, the binariness of accountancy. In most cases, it's either X or Y, yes or no, black or white, and there's very, very little scope for ambiguity, apart from if you're looking to do some creative accountancy. It seems with law, it's the opposite. Everything seems to depend upon particular variables. Is that one of the things that's drawn you towards it?
Um, I think the space to be creative in the interpretation of words is something you can do as a lawyer. I think
Mm-hmm.
that is a pleasurable aspect of the job. But it sort of depends. It depends what context you're in. If it's advisory, then there's less ifs and buts, and I think you should do this. But if it's litigation and you're in court, then sort of anything goes. You find the best argument you can to try and persuade the judge to see your point of view, but you don't know which way it's going to go. But I think that's a really exciting aspect of the bar anyway.
Okay. So on your LinkedIn, it says you are a future pupil barrister at 42 Bedford Row. What does that mean, Rob?
Well, I mean, hopefully it's still true. I'm not sure
Mm.
whether they've not actually spoken to me
Oh wow.
recently about whether coronavirus is going to change things.
Their website says it's business as usual, so we'll take that as positive.
Yeah, and that's what I'm believing at the moment as well. I am very confident it will be fine. But so basically, what it means is they've offered me pupillage,
Mm-hmm.
which is a fancy word for apprenticeship, basically. So they've offered me an apprenticeship with their chambers, which is the word for a collection of barristers, to essentially do work shadowing for 6 months. So they teach you the ropes, what it is to be a barrister. They teach you tips about how to become better at advocacy, and you basically learn from the best. And then for the second 6 months of your pupillage, you then are set off on your own to do your own cases in court, which is probably going to be a very daunting experience for me, but a very exciting one. And the general gist of it is you get very simple cases at the beginning, so lots of road traffic accidents, or perhaps some like unpaid wages claims or small employment cases. And then as you become more comfortable being in court and with your practice areas, then slowly you just become more and more experienced and take on more and more difficult cases.
So you mentioned they offered you. I'm sure there was a quite stringent recruitment process to get to this point. Do you mind providing some clarity?
Sure. I can give you the long version of the short version. I don't know what you prefer.
Let's do the long. It's informative as possible. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So the long version is that you have to decide you want to be a barrister early, I think, because from the moment I made that decision to the moment I was offered pupillage was probably about 4 years of determination and doing things to try and make that a reality.
Sure.
So first and foremost, you need good grades. That's not saying I have absolutely incredible grades. I have a 2-1. I don't have a first,
You're
which
1%
is
off a
a misconception.
first. It's yeah,
I was close to a first, yeah. I was going to keep that one quiet, but yeah. So lots of people think you need a first to become a barrister, and lots of people think you need to go to Oxford or Cambridge to become a
Mhm.
barrister, and neither of those facts are true. I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge. I didn't get first, and I have been offered pupillage. That might be a slightly different story if you want to go to the top commercial sets where you're going to be a millionaire before you're 30.
Mhm.
But you know, that's kind of fair enough because they'll probably be picking the 2 or 3 smartest minds in the country.
Mm.
So, but the point still stands. You need solid grades. You need to go to a good university. I've not seen anybody who didn't go to a Russell Group university get pupillage. So that's kind of the threshold, I'd say. It's a little bit of a shame that they look at that, but that is just what they look at. There are a few sets that are attempting to become more progressive recently, and they
Mhm.
do blind applications. So if you are one of those people who hasn't gone to Russell Group Uni but still wants to become a barrister, I pay really close attention to the sets that are doing that kind of application process. But once you've got your grades sorted, the next thing you have to do is basically show that you actually want to be a barrister rather than just wanting to do it because you get to wear the gown or wanting to do it because you think you're going to earn lots of money or just to have the title. They quickly see that if any of those things are your motivations, that you're not going to be a good barrister, and they won't take you on. So in order to prove that you actually want to do it, you have to do things that give you skills that would make you a good barrister.
Sure.
So one of those things is debating. Universities run lots of competitions. There's
Mm.
competitions absolutely everywhere, in fact.
Oh,
So
Tudor's educated me on the whole debating scene, man. I
exactly,
didn't
yeah.
know it existed.
Tudor has gone above and beyond,
Oh
actually.
wow.
Yeah, what they would want as a debater. Yeah, but he's traveling the world doing that kind of stuff. So the opportunity is definitely there. Or you can become a bit more specialized in the kind of experience that you do and do a thing called mooting,
Mhm.
which is basically the closest equivalent to being a barrister that there is without actually doing it for real life. I guess volunteering as well, but I'll get onto that. But what that is you're given a brief and a fake set of facts, and you have to create a 15-minute argument to persuade your judge that's in front of you that you should win, and you get points for advocacy, for speaking quality. I can't actually remember the other criteria, but that is a really good thing to do because it shows that you've tried what being a barrister is like, and
Mhm.
you can say that you've enjoyed it, and if you do well, you can say I'm also very good at it. So that's another thing you should think about. Volunteering is looked upon very favorably, whether that's just general volunteering for the elderly or doing whatever, or doing volunteering in a legal context and working for any of the legal charities that are in the UK, doing advisory work and sometimes some advocacy as well, on behalf typically of people who wouldn't be able to afford legal representation for themselves. That's another really good thing to do, because it shows that you're good with clients, and again it shows your commitment to the bar. But basically the problem in a nutshell is you have to persuade them that you want to be a barrister and that
Mhm.
you'll be a good barrister. But what they love, because lawyers generally are all about evidence, is proof of those
Sure.
things. You can't just say that you've wanted to be a barrister since you're 10
Since
years
you're
old.
4 years old.
You need to show that.
Okay. And I guess to some degree that's in most cases similar to most industries. So even with accountancy, like one of the questions they ask you is why do you want to be an accountant? And like such a simple question, but I think at the same time it's a very, very deep one. And because in
Yep.
most cases you're saying your job security and decent salary it won't get
Yeah.
you through to the next stage.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I don't think you should hide away from those facts either. I think, I mean, it's not as applicable for a barrister because I'd say job security is actually not something you get being a barrister because you're self-employed and you don't know when the work's coming in. But saying that you want to be fairly compensated for the amount of effort you've put into going into the profession that you want to enter is fair. I think you'd be lying if you'd say that wasn't at least a factor in your decision. Might not be the thing that you lead with because there's plenty of other reasons why you'd want to go into any particular profession, but I don't think there's any harm in mentioning that either.
So I've mentioned that in different interviews, maybe for accountancy and other roles, and you could see the body language of the interviewer
Mm,
on the other side of the desk change,
mm, mm,
and not for the positive either.
No,
It's like, wow, this
I'm
person's
with you
so
because
honest.
I think what they're saying or thinking is like, well, there's so many other things that you could have said.
Mm,
If you've gone straight to what I'm going to earn,
sure.
why is there not anything else? You know, that's probably what it makes them think.
And also, it's the level of, so to some degree, you know, I describe like work for companies in some cases like plantation work, which, you know, again, that's probably not a fair representation because you are in most cases compensated for your work. But again, for example, sales, for example, um, given a salary, oftentimes you get the opportunity to make a little bit more via commission. If your main motivation to join in this company, this role here, is the package you receive, what is to stop you from jumping ship when a more juicy prize um, appears right in front of you? And in that case, I guess from an employer point of view, that's where the pushback, that internal gut feeling goes, ah, shit, salary. When you hear somebody say that, because now you realize that this person, in essence, is a mercenary, and they will go to whoever pays them the highest salary. And that may not be us
Mm,
right now.
mm, mm.
And I've had, companies that we both work for mention this to me too, in a bit more polite ways than I just articulated.
No, it makes sense. I might think it myself if I was doing an interview and then that is what the person in front of me led with. I'd wonder, you know, do you care about the actual company? Yeah,
Do
I
you
agree.
think people care about companies when they apply?
Um, yes, not always. No, I think they can though. It depends what the company's doing. I also think it's more of a bonus rather than the main motivation for joining. I think personally, anyway, I look for what skills I think I will be able to develop in a role. That's really
Sure.
important to me. And then if within that role, it's also doing something good. Like Seed Leaders is actually a good example. You know, we're helping ambitious people raise money to try and realize their dreams in a cliche kind of way.
Hmm.
Um, that is nice. So it is even nicer working here. But was that why I wanted to join? Not really, no.
I've had, so I think it varies upon whether one you're looking to work at a startup or you're looking to join a faceless multinational organization. And I think for a startup, believing in the vision and liking the company are, I think, a bit more important variables when you decide what job to work at. For example, C Legals, I actually believe in the vision. I needed
Mm,
some of the products and services like the summer before I joined the company. Whereas,
mm,
multinational organizations I've worked at, like Capita, shout out to Capita, mate, yo, prior to the interview, I did not know what procurement was.
mm,
I did not know what consultancy really was. I had no idea about Capita's vision. Didn't care. I didn't really give a shit. Just saw a salary, working from home 3 days a week. Love that. Central
yeah,
London, get to wear a camel overcoat, briefcase. Love that. And there we go. I was sold. Now,
yeah.
in the companies where I've actually believed in the vision and the brand a little bit more, I have found there's been a direct correlation between how hard I'm willing to work and oftentimes tenure too. There's a positive correlation between those two. Whereas for other
Mm.
companies, when you see another offer, oh, wow, jumping ship super quick.
Well, I think what's nice as well, it's kind of like an unintended consequence, but if you have a company with a good ethos and that is actually doing something useful to many, I think it does attract a certain type of person, which means that the culture is nice.
Hmm.
Like I think, generally speaking, the type of person that works at Seed Legals is a person I like and get on with.
Oh, well, thanks, man.
Um, yeah, yeah, no problem, AJ. But I'm not sure that would be the case if I was working somewhere where I didn't actually believe in what they were doing.
I agree. So on the point of culture, what we have seen is a new generation, like quasi millennials, which I fall into, who are prioritizing different things when it comes to their employment life. And one of those things is culture. One of those things is like work-life balance.
Mm,
And it's so interesting seeing traditionally maybe more old-fashioned industries having to keep up with this brand new batch of graduates. So
mm,
I spent the majority of my summer cold calling relatively like small size companies, 0 to 50 headcount, having these type of conversations with like founders or C-suite executives, and many of them are just clueless. Many of them are just clueless as to how they like maintain, how they keep, how they retain like millennials. Because
Mm,
their idea of young people wanting work-life balances and caring about like culture and values is not what they're used to. Their idea is you come to the job, you slug it out,
yeah.
job for life apparently, where you magically retire and you get this golden watch at the end of 40th day,
Hmm.
just beyond your retirement party. And I think
Mm,
I'm liking the change. I think some companies are a bit slow to adapt, and I think some companies also go a bit too far and beyond. Like some
mm.
of the things
Oh
I've seen at
yeah,
Facebook and Facebook HQ is it's just a big playground in essence.
I agree with you actually. Yeah, and I'd love to say that I was different and not a stereotypical millennial,
Mm-hmm.
but I think based on the evidence, clearly I am, because I
Mm-hmm.
think I've resisted sort of regimented working hours my whole working life, by choosing working for a really small startup at Seed Legals, which gives you all the kind of startup trappings you'd expect. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm moving into a career where I'm self-employed. So although it will be a lot of hours, they'll be at my choosing. Um, and I don't know why I've chosen that. I don't know whether it is because of the hours. I don't know, but I don't know. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in solicitors firms and have seen people moaning about having to stay just to show your face. So maybe that's had an influence on me.
I've had that too, where you don't want to be the first person in the office to leave, so you just sat there looking around, like waiting for the first person to leave,
Yeah,
waiting for the director to leave, and it's oh shit, all right, cool. Then you have to wait another 5 minutes because nobody seemed too keen,
yeah,
and then you shut your
exactly. Yeah,
laptop
yeah.
down.
I think what's important to me is that I work in a place where it's completely meritocratic.
Mm.
So there's no points for loyalty. There's no points for being the last one in the office. You get points for how good your work is, and whenever you do it, it doesn't matter.
So how do you? Okay, so on the interesting point. So whenever I join companies, that's what I'm looking for. The meritocracy, where I believe if I put in X, I can get Y out if the X I put in is has a value that the company cherishes to some degree. However, saying that in itself is a very blanket statement because you do have to take into account that we are humans. There is the I call it the corporate game, the game being played where
Hmm.
um, there's people with high levels of emotional intelligence playing against those with maybe less high levels of emotional intelligence. And in essence, although we want the workplace to be a very fair environment where those who work the hardest provide the most value,
Mm,
rise to the ranks, there is in some cases those proverbial glass ceilings, and there is the game being played. And I've experienced the game, and I speak to some of my friends, in the different industries they're in, and we
mm,
all kind of see the game where typically it's in my case it's always felt as if it's carrot and stick. So you behave well, you have this beautiful juicy carrot dangled in front of you, and a carrot will often be salary increases or monetary incentives. And you hit those, and you get a little bit, just a little nibble of the carrot, never enough to really satisfy your appetite. However, at the same time, if you don't get the carrot, you're then punished with the stick, and the stick could be whatever. The stick could be, I don't know, being fired or whatever. However,
given bad work.
yeah, you do see some of your other colleagues who aren't managed, ruled, maybe rules probably the wrong word, managed in the same manner. And
Mm,
instead of it being a carrot, it's opportunity. And those opportunities could be in the forms of maybe, managing teams or being able to do particular good work outside of maybe the regimented,
mm,
agreed upon contracted work. And you take a step back and you think like, wow, this is like really meritocracy, and I'm really putting the work in. And luckily I'm in sales where it's very evident to see if you put the work in. There's a numerical number
mm,
next to your name every single quarter that you can't hide from it. Like that's why I like it.
mhm,
It's very
mm,
transparent.
mhm,
You think, oh
mhm,
wow, like okay, this is am I getting those opportunities? Am I being afforded those opportunities? If not, why? Am I
mm.
doing something wrong? Then you go on a nice internal journey. And then as much as you'd like the corporate world to be a meritocracy, I don't think I don't think it is in most cases, maybe in my personal experience.
No, well, I mean, there's no getting away from the fact that at the end of the day, it's still a person deciding who's above you, deciding whether you
Mm-hmm.
are going to get the good thing or the bad thing. So obviously, you've got to be nice, and yeah, if you're good at playing the game, then it helps. But I don't think C Leals is particularly like that at all. To give an example, I think there's plenty of people who socially, if it was based purely on social acumen,
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think the seniority would obviously be different. But I like that. I like that you don't have to be the loudest person in the office necessarily to be doing the best stuff.
I agree. So it's more so companies where you see people who've been there for a long time, or friends of friends who join at really high level positions, and you work with them, you realize this person is like quite quite incompetent. I'm, I'm really surprised. Like, and at times I'm actually like I'd love to learn from these people, because whenever I see people in relatively high positions, and again maybe it's my ignorance, I see them as being maybe not as capable at their job as maybe they should be. I'm always enamored as how they've managed to like get to that
Pull
point.
the wool over everyone's
Yeah,
eyes.
because like
Yeah.
I need to learn myself, because
Hmm.
this is part of the game that I'm failing at. So I've met people who it's a funny one. Speaking to a finance director who didn't quite understand like options or some tax liability included, and I was like you, and again, like maybe it's been some time since she's had to like maybe deal with this topic, but nevertheless, it's like wow, like, struggling to like use like Zoom and just other things, other like basic, like oh wow, like this is great. Like how are you doing
Do you know?
it?
I actually find this fascinating as well, because I sometimes think that it's maybe I shouldn't, but um, what I find comforting sometimes when I'm speaking or in a room where people are a lot older than me or have titles that are impressive is just reminding myself of the fact that, to be honest, at the end of the day, everyone's still just a person, and this is just their job, and it's probably not that important to them, and they've probably only done about 5 years in it, like most of the time. They've got a promotion and now they can do something more experienced, but they're not too dissimilar to anybody else, really. We're all just people. Not everyone's perfect. People get stuff wrong. You might not be able to remember stuff off the top of your head, and it relaxes me, I think.
I've come to the realization. So when you're young-ish, you have the idea that everyone has these things figured out, and the more you're able to communicate with people, maybe somewhat your senior, maybe in terms of like actual age-wise, but also maybe where they are in their career, you realize that in essence, the majority of people are just sort of winging it every day. And
Exactly.
like people have no idea. People have no idea what they're doing from one moment to the next, and they're just winging it and winging it and winging it. And it's like, oh wow, this again, it does. I do get some kind of comfort, some solace in that, knowing that, oh wow, these people who you put rightly or wrongly so having that conversation on a pedestal for maybe their acumens or things they've achieved, or just winging it, just every day,
Mm,
just making leaps of faith and
exactly. Yeah.
hoping it
Yeah.
works
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
best. And in most cases, I guess it does.
Having said that, though, there are some people where I am like, no, wow, you are really impressive, and
Yeah,
I'm
Laurent.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, I'm not surprised you've made it to where you are now. But yeah, not everyone.
So one of the things I've been trying to do for the last 14, 16 months is provide insight to people from my local community on industries they can go into outside of like what they know. So,
Hmm.
for example, like right now, tech. So right now, the black population in London is 13%. The black population in tech is like 1%. All right, so there's a clear discrepancy.
Hmm.
So providing more insight to people about the wonders of tech, and that there's so much you could do in tech. There's so many different job roles in tech that you had no idea. They don't necessarily actually require a technical background. That may that some
Yeah.
people don't, but may not have. Putting on workshops to provide that information to people, and it's actually a very difficult job. You see a lot of back and forth, because I've seen both the good and the bad in people, from reaching out to startups or medium-sized enterprises and speaking quite politely and quite bluntly in some cases to like senior executives about diversity and inclusion and what it
Mm.
means, being on their LinkedIn's, their sales navigators, seeing their companies just a sea of white,
Hmm.
them telling you point blank on the phone, no, we don't have we don't have a diversity problem. It's like, your LinkedIn says otherwise. Like, no, we don't.
Mm.
Thanks.
Mm.
Thanks for the call.
But how do you bridge that difference in opinion? Where I imagine the position he's coming from is Well, we've obviously never not chosen anyone because they're black or because they're a
Hmm.
woman or whatever. Um, but yeah, I understand the point you're making, which is it might not be specifically any of the actions you've done. It's that statistical difference that, you know, black men, for example, don't even know that the opportunities are there, and that's the fault that you've not made it more obvious. But for that person who said to you, "Well, we've not got a diversity problem," how do you persuade him of your point of view?
So I don't think my task is to persuade him or persuade anybody.
Mm,
My task is just to provide some information and
hmm
allow people to go on journeys to maybe open their horizons and make well-informed decisions. I've tried that method that we
mm,
mentioned of trying to persuade people that, hey, no, it's really important, and you're trying to take a step back and you think, okay, as a founder, like what do I assume, and assumption being the key part here, what do I assume that these founders or these CEOs care about? And it's their bottom line.
mm,
So you go online, you scour resources, you find some empirical data sets that outline, having a more diverse team leads to increases in your profitability, a better and a more stronger financial performance that quarter and quarters going forwards. You present this information to them in the form of articles like LinkedIn messages, and some people care about that. Some people's like, oh yeah, great, sure. Um,
mm,
Other times, I think the real task is just educational pieces. So I've worked at companies where my role was to inform male CEOs of the importance of having females in the senior leadership team, and
mm,
that situation was very interesting. So we took like race out of it. It was purely a gender dynamic play, and one man talking to another about bringing more women into the workplace and see leadership positions, and I love the level of like honesty and transparency I got from some of those conversations where people just hadn't even realized. And it's like, oh wow, like these are not really pressing issues in people's lives. As you mentioned before, people have other shit to worry about. Like diversity is not really a big concern. Hadn't even crossed their mind that what they're currently doing right now isn't working for particular reasons because um, they've never actually measured the progress of what they're doing based upon like diversity statistics. It was all about like bottom
mm,
lines. So for those individuals, it's just going on the
mm,
journey, sharing insight, showing them what other companies maybe in that sector immediately or maybe in other sectors or verticals that have some similarity are doing. And then hopefully eventually
mhm,
people will come to their sensibilities. What I'm against doing is arguing for people to see like my
mm,
humanity or other people's humanity. I,
mm,
I
mm,
don't I don't
mm,
think that's the right play, so to speak.
mm, mm. So, how do you think you get um, the black community more interested in tech then?
So currently it's workshops. It's I find, for example, there's one new agency called Clamp Agency. Shout out to Clamp. And why I'm mentioning Clamp is uh, one of the companies I have some like equity in. One of his sister, his cousin is one of the Clamp executives, one of the
Hmm
founders. So it's a team of like young black women from like ideally I think London who focus on digital branding and the creative agencies and I think tech as well. And all of them have some kind of like degree or postgraduate, undergraduate in tech. They kind of went viral on social media not too long ago by being one an all female led agency and one black women and thirdly black women in tech. So
hmm
I think it's positioning people in these industries in front of other
mm,
people, having them share some of their stories, how they got into it, and to be transparent with you, it's just for some people, again, take a step back. Why is there a push to go into consultancy? Why is there a push to go into the financial services? Well, ultimately, you know, you'd be hard pressed to find people who honestly look you in the face and say, "Oh, I love financial regulation.
mhm,
I just love derivatives. It just fascinates me
mm,
so much.
mm,
I just love being sat in front of a spreadsheet all day. I just love it." No, ultimately, the reason is the financial returns, the compensations, the
mhm,
remuneration. So it's like if you can find industries or roles in tech and people who look like these people in these positions, making good, great, well, nice incomes, being compensated quite nicely for their work, present these people to people from backgrounds who maybe had no idea these existed. I
mm,
think that alongside actually having framework to help support these people along the way is what's really needed. So, for example, we had an event. Time flies; it's very hard to track. I just want to say like this quarter, last quarter, that makes it easier, where we took students from like Lewisham to like Facebook HQ. It's like just fuck around, like talk to some Facebook executives, experience life at Facebook, and many of them didn't even know that getting a job at Facebook is something they could do. And it sounds like so crazy because you think like in most cases, all these kids are either using like Instagram or WhatsApp, both owned by Facebook. To think that these are apps that they spend crazy amounts of time on, they hadn't even thought about, hey, how can I work at this company?
Yeah.
So it's tasks like that, having given workshops, seminars, podcasts, content, providing. I think the most important thing is that framework, that structure. So planting the seed in people's minds is a great first step. But like once the seed has been planted and people are looking to take that first step, actually providing them with support from like first step to maybe every step along the way, from maybe what skill sets we need to learn to get to that stage, help with the recruitment process, whether that is like CV crafting, interview question and answering, how to even adopt. So most people, for example, I remember my first time I joined like a corporate. I was this kid from Southeast London. I speak relatively well now, but before then, man, I was so even the small things like my dialects, like my vernacular, how learning to like not use particular words.
But how did you feel about changing how you speak?
Oh man, it was hard. Luckily, right now, I've come to a consensus that um, I'm able to wear different hats. So I can talk how I talk with like my boys and talk how I talk, and I guess in a more professional setting, I can blend the two together. Prior, I'll be transparent. I had such fear of speaking how I normally speak that I would have to spend twice as long thinking about ways to actually articulate points in the manner by which like hid where I was from.
It's a really divisive topic at the bar as well, you know, because people from the regions, or like Southeast London, or they're from the north of England, anyone that doesn't have like received pronunciation or basically a posh accent has this thought in their mind when they come to the bar, which is, do I try and change my accent so that it's received by who needs to receive it better? And it's probably doing you could argue that it's providing a better service to your client, because if the judge in front of you prefers hearing people talk a certain way, if you don't do it, then he might be less likely to rule in your favor. And so arguably you're not doing your best for your client by not changing. But equally, on the other side of it, there's the human argument, which is, why the hell should you ever have to change how you speak? It's not relevant to what you're saying. You should be proud of where you're from. Why should I change for somebody else? There's no rule on how you should talk, and it splits people. Because I read an article from a barrister from Peckham who's doing very well, but he said, I completely changed my accent, and I just saw it as a practical reality of the job. I talk a bit different when I'm at home, but when I'm in court, I talk this way because it's what people expect, and it's going to get the best result for my client. But then you saw all of the comments being like, "Oh, it's a disgrace. It's, you know, it's so disrespectful to your culture. Why are you doing this?" Yeah, I don't know the answer.
We do it quite often. So we even joke about like there's I'm using quotation marks in case you're listening, like the white voice that you put on when you're at work, where you just sound completely different. For example, I'm in sales that requires a lot of speaking to people on the phone. Oh mate. I remember again, still in that I think I've reached that level where I'm confident in my knowledge of any particular topic, where I realize that as long as I can articulate the points in the manner by which the person on the other end, the client in this case, can understand how I articulate them, my mannerism, my appearance, to some degree, I don't think is as large as a factor as I once thought it was. And if it is, then I don't mind like losing those opportunities, because those aren't people I'd like to do business with anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So like right now, I'm wearing what am I wearing? Slides, tracksuit, do-rag, like silly like diamonds in my ears. I've gone to see Legal's events with like Jordans on, like ears studded, baseball cap, drinking cognac, talking shit, and I haven't felt out of place. And it's so interesting because, you know, you go to some of these events and you see people acting, behaving, wearing clothes that they've attributed to like what success is in their viewpoint. For example, like
Right.
VCs,
Patagonia
like,
quarter
oh man,
zips.
yeah,
Yeah,
yo, it's the navy blue quarter zips that kill me.
yeah,
You
yeah,
look around, it's the navy blue quarter zips, or the navy blue suits, or the white shirts, or
yeah.
everyone has a Rolex that is 40 millimeters in circumference, and that's it. It needs to be 40 millimeters. I haven't seen anything less, anything more. It's
Mhm.
either a deep sea or a submariner, or and those are typically the only options. Occasionally, you might see a Daytona every now and again, but those
Mhm.
are it. And everyone just like acts the same, talks the same, drinks the same wine. Everyone just, and I think for me, it's always great because I approach them how I'm talking, how I
Mhm.
behave. Luckily, at these events, we go to, you speak, and then you get inundated with people who want to ask you questions. So you're always in that position of leverage. People come up to you, and you can just be yourself. And like in most cases, you just have people like, I've literally had people like unzip, undo their ties, pull their shirts out when they're talking to me. I'm like, yeah, man, get comfortable, be free. Don't play a character.
No,
Just be
it's good.
yourself.
It's good you put them at ease. That's funny. I hadn't thought of
It's fun. I,
that.
I have a great time. So, and I think letting people know. So ultimately, it comes. So currently, I've just finished like a book by Franz Fanon, Black Skin, White Mask, and one of the many books of his I recommend. And it talks about how whether people want to admit it or not, there is this level of inferiority that black males or people who necessarily aren't white feel in the premises or when they're surrounded by people who happen to be white. And then the mindset shifts from what the mindset is normally to I need to like prove I am intelligent. I need to prove I am this to this person. And people tend to go above and beyond to like you, as I mentioned before, to make a case in point of their humanity to people. And I think that really comes from a deep seated level of like insecurity and like in like oneself. And I think, I've transcended that point, but I still see some of my peers and just people in general who haven't quite got to that stage. And you do see the differences in how they behave when
Did
they're
you did
around.
you have you felt like that before?
Oh yeah, for sure. My mindset has always been for example, I remember the one example that really like drummed it home to me. So I was just been promoted as an analyst, like things are going well, pay rise, I was feeling myself, as I mentioned before, it was the camel overcoat, navy blue
Yeah,
suit,
yeah.
briefcase, wango, all that good stuff. I was in what shop was this? House of Phrases, buying myself a little gift, just treating myself, you could treat yourself, take care of yourself, you don't treat
Mm,
yourself who you will in a suit, fresh haircut, got a haircut every single 2 weeks because I didn't like to be unkept because, for
mhm,
whatever reason. And again, that's attributed to like this point as well. I'm in a shop and security guard is just following me.
mm,
I'm so confused. I'm like, yo, I was like, so why are you following me?
mm,
So I got money. Like I actually have a lot of money right now. You actually be
mm,
surprised at how much money I have to spend right now. And then again, the mindset was, and again, I did something silly. I just bought shit. I didn't actually, I wanted them, but I didn't really want them. I bought them to like prove a point.
mm. But that,
So I
yeah,
had
I
this
I
mind.
totally get that because that's just a fuck you, isn't it? It's like
Mm.
fuck you thinking I'm gonna steal. Like I'll buy everything in it, just to just show you. I get that. I'd probably feel like that if I
But
was being suspected of stealing.
okay, well, in the long run, in that particular exchange, like who really won? So like the organization that hired that individual with probably maybe it was his own biases to follow me around, or maybe the security protocol to follow people who look like me around. They have just enticed me or pushed me to spend more money than I would have spent otherwise, and I've just left the store where maybe my bruised ego is somewhat
Mm,
massaged, but now I'm 200 300 pounds out of pocket. They've just gained 200 300 pounds of my hard money. So in that interaction,
yeah.
like, who really won?
Yeah, well, I know. Yeah, it's emotional. It's an emotional reaction, wasn't it? But
Mm.
it's one I think most people would feel like making.
So there's a lot of work to be done, and I think I've had this conversation in regards to like, is there hope? And I think there is hope, um, but I think more work needs to be done to get to that point. I mean, first of all, if for us to like have this conversation about whether there's hope or not, I think more people, and I know you're quite progressive in your ideology, more people really need to understand the gravity of the problem that is currently being faced.
Mm,
And like once we have, as a society, recognize this problem, then we can like work on what we'd like the solution to the problem to be, and then we can like reverse engineer and work on steps to get to that point. Currently, I don't believe feels the wrong word. I don't believe that enough people are aware of the problem itself, and secondly, the heaviness, the scale of the problem. Um, and I think based upon those two factors, like change will happen very, very, very slowly, probably at a similar pace as to what is happening or how it's happening currently. Um, and not much will ultimately change. So I'd love to tell you that I'd love to be live in a world where if I'm fortunate enough to have children, they won't have to go through the same struggles and trials that I've experienced in my life, and they can, feel confident that they can go to any higher education institution they want, and as a result of that go to like any particular job, apply, not have to like change their names or change their mannerisms, change how they act, and join these companies, work hard, progress, become, to climb the corporate ladder, so to speak. But saying this would be me wax poetic and about an idyllic state, or that I don't think is ever going to be achievable in the immediate future if we carry along the path we're currently on.
You've said it better than I could.
Yeah, I think that's a very like bleak way to end the podcast. where do you go next? But I think, by facing those like past truths, I think it's refreshing, it's liberating too, because what it's helped me understand is that I've personally changed like my value system, and I think that's one of the things that more people have to do too, right? So instead of having a value system that valued all these, like, in essence, like things that don't really matter, these material items, and this idea of what can I do for self to progress myself. Now it's more, what can I do to progress my community, and as a result push myself up as a result of doing so. And I think more people need to come to that collective way of thinking more so than their selfish way of thinking.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there is a different way of saying that. I wonder if you agree that it means kind of the same as, because I believe in it, which is doing things that you actually care about internally, that make you feel good, rather than living for what you think people think of you and trying to prove people wrong. I don't think that ever leads you to being happy or proud, proving people wrong. I think you gotta focus on what you like doing and actually what you want, what you enjoy.
I think I think a lot of meditation needs to come into that to really understand like what you, as in like the idea of like Rob, what you yourself actually like, and like you need to work on like what you like, and then dissociate it with like what you think you like. Because so I did a crazy exercise when I was studying philosophy, sixth form, and it was recommended by Jerry Parsons, an awesome teacher, one of my favorite teachers actually. Shout out to Jerry Parsons, where you had a sheet of paper, A4 sheet of paper, folded into two. Things I care about, things I don't care about, right? And then you write down things you care about, things you don't care about. And that things you care about list is exhaustive. It's comprehensive. It's like a lot of shit there. I care about a lot of stuff apparently, right? And then like you kind of revisit this, do the same task, brand new A4 sheet of paper, fold into maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks in the future, maybe 6 weeks in the future, same task. And now you've noticed that the things I think I care about, that list has become like somewhat shorter. And the things you don't care about list has become a little bit longer. And then you keep just making iterations to the sheet over and over and over again. And you actually get to a point where like you've really become very crystal clear on the 1 to maybe 5 or so things that you actually truly care about. And then you realize, wow, this whole time I thought I cared about this shit. I don't give a fuck about this shit. Why do I think I care about this shit? And you realize this is all of this societal conditioning that I'd been going through, that I'd actually internalized. I'd actually told myself that I wanted like this thing, or I cared about this thing. I didn't give a shit about this thing. And I think that task in itself, I did it like quite some years ago, and I think it's probably time to maybe give it another revisit.
See if you can whittle it down to one.
It's myself, no. That task has been like very, very helpful in outlining a few things. Like, one, it's what we actually care about, but two, like the level of internalization that we do when it comes to like societal norms, and that in some cases, we really think that like I am myself, I own my thoughts. However, we aren't aware of the influence, how influenced we are in our way of thinking. And I think there's a few ways by which we can tailor that. And one of them would be to, like, strip away any content we're consuming that isn't actually informative and providing value to our lives, and stay away from the bullshit, stay away from the fuck shit, excuse my language, and really just focus on things that better us. And then be around people that push us intellectually, stimulate us,
Yeah.
and do these exercises and spend time, like, dissociating from society, dissociating from social media, and really just reflecting upon like what you really want. Silence, and this corona time is like corona time. It's perfect because like all you have is time in essence, and also ultimately that's one of the most important things is time. And now you have your time given back to you, and now's some time to like maybe plan, meditate.
Why are you using it? Yeah, how are you using it? I know,
exactly.
I know. Yeah, I believe in that. On that note, I better go and do my evening run.
Oh wow, yeah. I'm gonna do a little workout outside and probably get back to reading a book. I've been recommended a book by my life coach. It's called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna crack into that.
I've heard of C.S. Lewis. I've not heard of that book though.
My life coach is trying to get me to get into religion. I think that's what Tim's trying to do in the most like sneaky way possible. So
are you a religious guy?
So I used to be, and then I kind of took a step back, and I realized that, especially in the Black community, religion has probably done more harm than good. So right now, I have no religious inclination. I do believe that, it works for some people. There's very important messages and tenets that you can live your life by. However, I think what it tends to do is it blinds people to other things. So you become so tunnel visioned on your religious cult, so to speak, that you forget everything else. And most of these religions have the same basic tenets that you should all strive to be good to one another, treat people respect, do unto others like you'd like done to yourself. And I think those core tenets, I think, are very important, and everyone should like strive to work on those to live a good life. But in regards to this, all this divisiveness of I'm a Christian, you believe in Islam, or you study Judaism, I think so much divisiveness right now is happening in our society. I think we need to take a step back and realize that there's so much more commonality than there is things that we have separate. And I think religion kind of aids to that divisiveness, and ultimately people will realize that we are all just one.
I think that with politics as well. I think just don't take it easy. Don't adhere to anything too strongly.
That's the motto, man. Just take it easy, bro. Like Kuna Matata, no worries. Take it easy. And on that note, let's call a wrap. So I'm gonna give you some shout out. Where can people follow you? Do you like write?
No, to be fair, I've almost invisible social media footprint. I don't think I've even posted on Instagram for about 4 years.
Nice.
And I haven't been on Twitter or Facebook either. Yeah, just lurk instead.
Just an idea.
Yeah, find me on Intercom on Seed Legals.
Oh, awesome.